and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And welcome to On the Money, your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour we'll be talking about the shortage of taxi drivers in London and across the UK. As ever, we'll bring you an in-depth discussion with a host of people who really know their stuff. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 1 o'clock. David Henderson, the businessman convicted over organising the flight that crashed and killed Emiliano Sala, has been sentenced to 18 months in prison. The plane crashed into the English Channel in 2019, killing the striker and pilot. David Henderson's lawyer said his legal team will consider an appeal against his conviction. 1,000 people reached the UK in a single day yesterday, in a new record for the current migrant crisis. Rescue operations worked well into the night, with some of the boats carrying up to 50 people. Yesterday's total will surpass the previous single-day record set earlier this month. Russia has sent paratroopers to Belarus in a show of support for its ally amid tensions over an influx of migrants at the border with Poland. The European Union says Belarus is encouraging thousands of migrants to cross its borders illegally. It warns it could impose more sanctions against Belarus and against airlines carrying migrants. Turkish Airlines has agreed to suspend one-way ticket sales for Middle Eastern migrants looking to reach Europe via Belarus. A new draft of the COP26 agreement has been published on the final scheduled day of the climate summit. The new proposal appears to back away from a call to phase out coal and fossil fuel subsidies completely. The draft is likely to undergo further negotiations, which are meant to finish at 6 p.m. today, but could overrun. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says Boris Johnson should return to Glasgow for the talks. Labour's International Development Secretary Preet Kaur-Gill told GB News leaders haven't done enough.
We're nowhere near where we needed to be on halving the global emissions. We're actually putting our planet on track, as you've seen from the reports, for a disastrous 2.4 degrees of warming. And I think it's been really concerning. When I was there, certainly talking to Global South activists, the one thing that they were very clearly saying is we don't just want new warm words. What we actually want to see is action.
Tory MP Sir Roger Gale says it's plain wrong for MPs to claim expenses on their rent while owning homes in London. 14 MPs, including former Attorney General Sir Geoffrey Cox, are reportedly earning money as landlords in London while also renting homes with taxpayers' cash. A loophole in the parliamentary expenses scheme allows them to do this. Paul Goodman, former MP and editor of the Conservative Home, told GB News the practice is murky.
If you're living in one place and working in another, can you claim? It seems to me reasonable that you can. Can you rent out somewhere and claim for somewhere else? That seems to me to be much murkier.
The Court of Appeal has declined to increase the sentence of Sam Pybus, who was jailed for 4 years and 8 months for choking his lover to death during sex. 3 judges rejected a bid by the Attorney General to increase Pybus's sentence, finding it was not unduly lenient. A student who admitted in a game of truth or dare to murdering his step-grandmother has been sentenced to life and will serve a minimum of 15 years. 21-year-old Tiernan Darnton told 2 friends that he'd set a curtain on fire at 94-year-old Mary Gregory's bungalow in Lancashire. An inquest had ruled it was an accident caused by a discarded cigarette. Police reopened the case when Darnton also confessed during a counselling session. England's Ellis Genge has become the latest player to test positive for COVID-19. A Rugby Football Union statement said he received the result this morning and immediately went into isolation. He's been ruled out of tomorrow's clash with Australia. England captain Owen Farrell said the rest of the team were preparing for the game as normal.
It is very disappointing as an individual, especially having to isolate and be on your own. You can go through different emotions, but I think as a team, we obviously had to go through the testing this morning, which is thankfully all good so far, and now we're preparing as normal, and hopefully we can make sure that when Ellis is watching it at home, he sees a good team performance.
And former England midfielder Ron Flowers has died at the age of 87. He was a member of the 1966 World Cup winning squad. A statement from his former club Wolves described him as a giant on the pitch and a gentleman off it. Flowers was awarded an MBE in the 2021 New Year's Honours List. You're right up to date. I'm back with the latest headlines in half an hour. But for now, let's return to Liam and On the Money.
And this is On the Money. Today we're talking taxis, and particularly the ongoing battle between traditional hail cabs, telephone book minicabs and the car request apps like Uber and Bolt. All this amidst an increasingly acute driver shortage. And it's Friday, so it must be On the Money's feature Startup Britain, where we showcase some of the most successful and unique British firms. Today, we're talking to Tom Harper, who left his career as an accountant to create Little Imagineers, a company which focuses on play sofas for children and toddlers. See me trying to put the thing up. As ever, I want your questions, opinions, suggestions. It's your show too, so get in touch. Email gb.uk or tweet at GBNews. We read all your emails. We'll read out some of the best later in the show, so stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Taxi! It's a cry you used to hear frequently on street corners across London and many other UK cities. But the age-old practice of physically hailing cabs has been seriously challenged over the years, not just by telephone-driven and online minicabs, but more recently, of course, by the car request apps such as Uber and Bolt, which you use via your mobile phone. Now, on top of the technological upheaval, the taxi industry as a whole is facing a serious driver shortage. More than half of licensed minicab taxi drivers haven't returned to the trade since the pandemic, says a new report from the Licensed Private Hire Car Association. The LPHCA estimates the industry's previously 300,000 strong workforce has fallen by 160,000. Many drivers left the industry during successive lockdowns as demand plummeted and haven't come back. This shortage of drivers, along with a backlog in the costly licensing and registration process, plus criminal and medical checks for new drivers, has created what the LPHCA calls a perfect storm. The lobby group points out that drivers must pay up to £600 to their local council just to obtain a one-year licence on top of all their other costs. This driver shortage has prompted concerns also over the safety of women students and nighttime workers struggling to get home. The Office for National Statistics has published figures suggesting that 49% of women do not feel safe walking alone after dark. In the capital, drivers of London black taxis must undergo a famously gruelling training programme known as the Knowledge that can take years to complete. And traditional London cabbies have been subject to particularly serious competition from the hailing apps like Bolt and Uber. But with the tech companies themselves suffering from a lack of drivers, is that an opportunity for London's black cabs and their counterparts in other British cities to fight back? Londoners can book a traditional black cab using an app called Get, and that's now reporting 40% more rides each day than during the first quarter of 2020 prior to that pandemic. So there's a driver shortage, there's an ongoing battle between the tech giants and traditional taxi firms, and that's your On the Money question today. As the taxi wars hot up, will consumers win? So On the Money, as regular viewers know, we have in-depth discussions with people who really know their stuff. It's a jam-packed show today. With us we have Cabbie and General Secretary at the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association, that's Steve McNamara. Also joining the discussion is John Constantine, a taxi driver and none other than Manchester's only green badge tour guide. We've got David Lorry, the Director of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association. And we have Michael Kill, the CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association, highlighting that safety aspect. And here in the studio, On the Money regular, Vicky Price, the economist, and also Steve McNamara, who's the General Secretary of the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association. Thanks to all of you. Steve, let's start with you. Are there taxi wars? Is there a driver shortage? Will consumers win?
It's a very mixed picture across the country, depending upon where you are. There's very separate areas and very specific problems that have arisen. In London, it's very different from around the country. In London, taxis and private hire vehicles are very separate vehicles, very separate industries. The taxi trade, as you rightly said, drive black cabs. The drivers have to do the knowledge. Very, very different to the private hire industry, where you just get a licence and drive an ordinary car. There is no shortage of taxi drivers, black cab drivers. There is a shortage of vehicles. We had 18,000 at the start of the pandemic. We're down to only 14,000 now.
Across the capital, this is?
Across the capital. Yeah. The reason for that is many drivers during the pandemic that fell through the gaps in the various schemes that were run, sold their cabs, de-licensed cabs, and so we're about 4,000 cabs down. The good news is those numbers are coming back up. Taxi drivers in London are investing about £3 million a week in new electric vehicles, these new electric ones you see. 35% of the fleet is now electric, and very shortly London will have not only the best taxi service in the world, but the greenest. The private hire industry is suffering from a shortage of drivers, and this is true around the country. And the primary reason for that is economics, primarily driven by the app companies. They pitched up 2012, 2013, and their only selling point, their USP was that they were cheap. The drivers came to work for them. Many of them were working long hours for very little money. You'll be aware that they took these app companies to the Supreme Court.
They did.
And many of them left during the pandemic to work for supermarkets and delivery firms, and they've realised that they earned more money working for those. They were better paid, they had better conditions, their tax and national insurance was paid. They weren't having to scrape and bow to people to get an extra star rating at 3 o'clock in the morning. And as a result, they're not coming back. What's going to happen? The private hire industry needs to recognise that its prices were unrealistically low. I saw yesterday that Uber have raised their prices by 10%, possibly 25% with some rides. That will get some drivers back, but most Uber drivers will tell you that's nowhere near enough. Most of their rides are still totally uneconomic. That's why they're not covering the work, and that's why there's a shortage.
So that's a perspective from Steve McNamara of traditional London cabbie there. Let's talk to David Laurie, the director of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association. David, do you agree with what you heard there from Steve McNamara? What is the state of play now between minicabs, if you like, minicab companies and those apps, Uber and Bolt?
Well, yeah, I agree with almost all of what Steve said. I mean, Steve and I have been involved in many DFT meetings around the country anyway, and he's quite right. And Steve is quoting the regulations and the situation in London. He's far more knowledgeable about the situation in London than I am. Around the country, there are a lot of private hire drivers that have to undergo the same knowledge test as hackney coach drivers do. Around the rest of the country as well, there is a shortage of drivers, and as Steve's quite rightly said, a lot of them have gone into delivery drivers, DPD, food delivery drivers, going working in supermarkets, and again, to echo Steve, it's once they've done that, they've realised that it's a lot easier, they can earn more money, and they haven't got the local authorities breathing down the necks as well. So, yeah, they're not going to come back. And to to add to that problem, you've got a lot of local authorities that are introducing newer conditions and newer criteria that, in light of the lack of government support for the industry through COVID, isn't affordable. So that's even more reason for them not to come back.
John, let's turn to you. John Constantine, taxi driver in Manchester. I'm asking the question, will consumers win? From what we've heard so far, it sounds that, if anything, prices are going to go up, possibly by quite a lot. Do you think that's inevitable?
I think it's inevitable, but like you said earlier on, one of your first talker there said that it was a race to the bottom, really, and it was all on price. And obviously, you can see now I'm sat in my taxi. I've got the electric taxi up in Manchester, and it is hard work, but also with the looking at the environment and how things are changing, that these vehicles are the future, and this is where we've got to be. So where the taxis, the mini cabs, the private hire were cheap, then they're going to get more expensive, and that's going to bring people back into the black cabs, the licensed trade. Obviously, we have the facilities also for taking wheelchair accessible vehicles and all the different aspects of it. And people feel safe when they see a black cab and feel safe when they get in a black cab, and that's how it should be.
Have to buy your electric vehicle, John. What were the economics of that compared to replacing it with a traditional diesel taxi?
Well, in Manchester, we don't have the emissions charge, the emissions zone yet, but it's on its way. So factoring in that I needed to buy a new taxi and factoring in that we are going to get the emissions charge, then it just made sense to buy the electric taxi. I also operate a company called Manchester Taxi Tours, so I do tours by taxi, and the electric vehicle just made sense. It's a 6-seater, it has the full panoramic sunroof, and this is a luxury vehicle. This is not to be confused with a minicab. This is like a limousine.
You, Michael Kill, we're hearing about, yes, traditional taxis making a fight back, enhanced by their own technology, if you like, but there is a lot of cost for these guys. Their fuel costs are going up. The cost of electric vehicles is very, very high, often compared to traditional taxis. It's all going to make it harder and more expensive to get a taxi, particularly late at night. And that really raises safety concerns, doesn't it?
Well, look, I absolutely sympathise, and there are reciprocal positions right the way across different industries, and the cost of operating is going through the roof, whether it be product, fuel, etc. So I completely feel for the taxi industry as a whole, and I know they're sort of progressing and working forward to get to that sort of pre-COVID position. The challenge that we have with all of this is, our focus, particularly over the last few months and over many years, is about vulnerability, public safety, and I think taxis, private cabs play a huge part in that, alongside the infrastructure of cities. So I think it's vitally important that we support as much as possible that regeneration. And I think it's important that some of the city leaders put some focus into ensuring that the infrastructure is reformed as soon as possible, and that goes as far as ensuring that the taxis have an opportunity to regenerate as quick as possible, especially in light of the lack of support that they've had during the pandemic period, which, you know, I completely agree with, and it's sad to hear that they've been put in that position and we've lost so many.
Vicky, you're not a taxi driver. Maybe a career change is imminent. You are a top economist, former government economist. What do you make of this that we're hearing? There is a driver shortage. The costs are going up for black cab drivers, mini cab drivers. Prices are going to go up for ordinary people. It's going to feed inflation.
Well, absolutely. And of course, demand has increased very significantly. We've seen the data just for the last couple of weeks when demand for black cabs has gone up very significantly because people are now going back. It's Christmas, of course. There's a seasonal element to it. But what I worry about is what's going to happen when the tourists really start coming back. I mean, so far we haven't seen them, but now, of course, with the US trade increasing, that's going to get slowly back to normal. And where are the taxis going to be? And of course, how do you get people to move around without using their own transport, which of course generally is more polluting than what those new taxis in fact are doing, which is a really good advance to ensuring that we meet some of our targets for COP26.
But it's all cost for the cabbie though, isn't it? And his or her family, that cost has got to be passed on. And it seems like there's an echo here of the HGV debate. Licensing taking a long time, huge bureaucratic rigmarole for these drivers, particularly if they want to become a driver. We need more people in the industry. If they want to get up and running, lots of boxes to tick.
Absolutely. Of course, there is some, in London, as far as I understand it, there is some grant or at least help with buying those electric vehicles. But of course, you've got to, from what I understand again, and I stand corrected if necessary, old vehicles over 12 years old have to be gotten rid of. Then you have to get your new vehicles, which are considerably more expensive, of course. But they will hopefully last for quite some time. And the question, of course, even for the taxi drivers is where do they find the charging points to be able to do it? I mean, London claims to have more charging points than many other cities in Europe. But of course, many of them are clogged up by the private hire vehicles, which are either hybrid or electric as well. So there is a little bit of that going on. But there is one positive element to all this. There is a look now, I think, again, in terms of do we need 4 years of doing the knowledge? But the positive thing about it is that there was a medical study, which showed that the brains of taxi drivers are hugely greater.
They're great Sudoku players. I want them in my pub quiz team.
Absolutely.
Steve, I'm getting your number.
You don't want me in your pub quiz, Steve. I'm not going to assure you.
We'll come back to this and other pressing issues of our time after the break. Thanks a lot to my discussants. Stay where you are because we will be rejoining this discussion. Taxi wars, will consumers win? You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Stay with us. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast. We'll be reading out some of those. You're On the Money.
Hello. A lot of cloud out there through the day today, and we've got some spells of rain through the rest of Friday. Pretty windy for many of us as well, and that's all down to a deep area of low pressure that we've got across the UK. You can see that anchored up towards the northwest of Scotland. Tightly packed isobars mean some pretty strong winds and a few weather fronts out there, which will bring us the rain as we go through the rest of the day today. Let's take a look at the picture then through this afternoon. You can see a spell of rain across many northern and western areas. This will be heavy at times, accompanied with those strong winds. Not as much rain further south, but a lot of cloud in the sky. Bits and pieces of rain coming and going. 1 or 2 brighter breaks at times, but pretty gusty. Those winds will be quite breezy across many areas, particularly around some of our western coasts, but mild, highs of 15 degrees. Through this evening and overnight, that rain continues to journey its way eastwards. Heavy for a time across parts of Cumbria and Yorkshire, but it will ease as we go through the evening and overnight. So for many, it's becoming much drier, and there'll be some clear skies across Scotland and Northern Ireland. So temperatures starting to take a tumble here as those winds ease, 5 or 6 degrees in rural spots, but staying mild across the south in double figures. So as we start Saturday then, plenty of sunshine across a large swathe of Scotland, northwest England and Northern Ireland, but a lot of cloud elsewhere. Through the day though, I am hopeful that we will see some breaks developing in that cloud, but it will stay quite grey down those eastern coasts with some patchy drizzle, and later rain arrives into the west of Northern Ireland, but for eastern parts of Northern Ireland it stays largely fine. Best of the sunshine across Scotland through Saturday, temperatures just a shade down on what they were during Friday. Through Saturday evening then, we continue to see this weak weather front pushing across Northern Ireland, bringing some thicker cloud and outbreaks of rain. Elsewhere, some patchy cloud, but under clearing skies, we will see some fog forming. So by the time we start Remembrance Sunday, a bit of a grey picture for many, brightening up for some through the day, and it stays on the rather mild side. Bye-bye.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money. We're continuing the discussion on the taxi industry's driver shortage, backlogs in licensing, and the impact of competitors such as Uber and Bolt. I'm still with our guests, and let's start with cabbie Steve McNamara, London cabbie. We heard there from your colleague John Constantine in Manchester. They don't have the ULEZ zone, but he still bought an electric vehicle. It's a big deal to buy an electric cab. It's a lot of money, right?
It's a massive investment, £65,000 by the time that you finance it and run it. You're looking at 80, 85 grand. But you've got a taxi driver without a taxi is unemployed. And we have to buy these new electric vehicles in London, but equally we're very keen to do so because what we recognise is that we're a key part of this city, and anything we can do to improve it and clean it up is something we're happy to do. And as I've said to you just now, £3 million a week, we're doing it in, with big money.
How worried are London cabbies who do now have to buy these electric vehicles as the diesel vehicles get phased out? How worried are they that the cabs they buy with these batteries in, they may not have much second-hand value because the batteries may... we don't know how long these batteries last, do we?
That was an issue. That was early concerns when the vehicles first come. But at the moment, the residual values of these vehicles that are now three and a bit years old is still very high.
Okay.
What you're also seeing in the motor industry as well is that second-hand battery and EV motors at the moment are fetching premiums. So that's not a realistic concern at the moment.
Let's go back to David Lorry, the director of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association in Lancashire there. David, tell us about the concerns that your members may have about electric vehicles, the requirements on them to move away from petrol and diesel cars.
It is more of a concern in rural districts, in cities like London and Manchester and places like that.
I think we need
it's
to
not
get
as much of a
David's sound.
Can you hear me?
David, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me now?
OK, let's leave David for now. We'll come back to him. Let's go to John Constantine. John, in Manchester, you said you don't have to buy electric vehicles yet, but you are expecting an emission zone to come in. All of it is extra cost. What would you say to consumers who are facing big cost of living increases, their own household fuel bills are going up, they may not be getting higher wages to meet inflation? If taxis are going to get more expensive, won't they just use them less?
Well, our fares are regulated by the City Council, so even though we invest in more money in the vehicles, the actual fares haven't gone up. So the fares are still the same as they were 4 or 5 years ago. So there's not been any rise in the actual increase for the passenger. So we're just absorbing the cost of the electric vehicle through work. So it's that for the customer, there's no extra charge for travelling in an electric black cab than a diesel black cab.
Seeing in the capital of the north, as it were, sorry Sheffield, sorry Leeds, are you seeing the same evidence of a driver shortage that we're certainly seeing in the capital?
Well, as a taxi driver, you always think there's too many taxis. So it's, yes, at peak periods, like on a Saturday night, late on, there is a demand for taxis. But on a sort of Monday dinner time, then there's not a demand for taxis. So it's just, as it's always been, that's always been a perennial problem. A lot of people go out on a Saturday night where they might not go out on a Tuesday night. So you would have more demand at peak periods. But we have an extra charge for the night rate, but we don't have an extra charge if it's busy or if we don't have any increases in the rates. We just have set rates by the council.
Michael, something that I've seen myself, and it's been picked up in consumer surveys, not just in London, but surveys I've seen in Birmingham and indeed in Manchester, because there aren't enough drivers, particularly minicab drivers, not black cab drivers, which by regulation must take anyone who asks to any destination as long as they got their light on. But you do get some minicab drivers choosing not to take certain people, waiting until they get a fare that suits them, is maybe more as much money as they want, is more convenient for them for their home trip. All of this adds to the difficulties, doesn't it, of young people, particularly young women, getting cabs home?
Without a doubt. And look, it's a challenge. I've not heard too many stories like that, if I'm going to be honest with you. But there is definitely, it's tougher to get taxis at those peak periods as suggested. And it's, the concern is particularly for people late at night, the last thing we want is people to be stranded. And particularly there's a huge focus on women's safety at night. And general public safety. So I think we have to really understand how vitally important these taxi services are to keep the nighttime economy moving and safe. Alongside things like night tubes, alongside bus services, etc. They're a vital lifeline for people to get home to family safely. And I don't think city leaders can underestimate that. They need to put enough resource into ensuring that there is every opportunity to get back to full strength. And, we would fully support that as an industry. And I know people out there that struggle to get cabs, would welcome that from city leaders across the UK.
Hi, David Laurie again. Sorry about those sound issues, David. You're director of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association. What would be the one thing that you would want to happen in order to try and alleviate this driver shortage?
Well, there's a few things that I need to come back on. At the start of the show, you said about the stats. It's worth noting that the renewal cycle for a driver license is 3 yearly. At the start of the pandemic, we ran a freedom of information request and we quoted ONS figures. And there was 552,000 people employed within the taxi and private hire industry. In April of this year, which was the first year of the 3-year cycle for renewals, we were down to 370,000. So that is a huge loss. The other thing as well is, as has been quoted already from Manchester, I wanted to raise that where the drivers are being forced to go out and buy these electric vehicles, the councils regulate the fares. So the extra costs that are being implied onto the trade can't be passed on to the customer without the council approval first. So there needs to be a more practical approach. There needs to be more support. And whilst it might be viable in cities like Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield and London, when you look at rural areas, there isn't that level of income. But it doesn't just affect the nighttime economy and people getting home safe. It also affects the pensioners. So there needs to be a practical and more supportive approach in order to encourage drivers back into the industry.
Brief word from Vicky. Sorry to squeeze you on time.
And people are moving back to that. I mean, it's wonderful to see the black cabs out there now. We used to see them wander around without anyone on it, as the pandemic was coming, towards its end of a real restriction period, and feel really quite sorry for them. But it's now quite difficult actually to get one, which I find quite reassuring. But I think the very interesting point that was just made about using, looking at that type of transport as an alternative or an add-on to public transport, for example. Generation or for loads of others to ensure the economy still moves. And of course, it's much more expensive to go down that route than it is really for taking that extra mile, if you like, with a cab that is going to be just around the corner. It's going to take you wherever you want to after you've completed your bus journey, if you can't go any further with public transport. And actually, it's a very, very much part of the infrastructure that we do want to see.
Thank you, Vicky. Economist Vicky Price, friend of the show. Steve McNamara, London cabbie. Indeed, Secretary of the London Taxi Drivers Association, thank you very much for coming in. We forgot Dave Laurie up there in Lancashire, Director of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association. John Constantine, well known in Manchester, another cabbie, and of course Michael Kill, the CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association. Thank you to all of you for joining our discussion here on The Money today. Coming up, today's Startup Britain is with Little Imagineers. It's a family-run business on a mission to reconnect children with playtime. But before that, it's the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are the latest headlines. Alok Sharma says it's his sincere intention to end COP26 today. The Climate Summit's president added that the draft of the COP26 agreement is not yet totally clean as negotiations continue. The latest draft agreement appears to back away from a call to phase out coal and fossil fuel subsidies completely. 1,185 people reached the UK in a single day yesterday in a new record for the current migrant crisis. Rescue operations worked well into the night, with some boats carrying up to 50 people. Yesterday's total surpasses the previous single-day record set earlier this month. David Henderson, the businessman convicted over organising the flight that crashed and killed Emiliano Sala, has been sentenced to 18 months in prison. The plane crashed into the English Channel in 2019, killing the striker and pilot David Ibbotson. David Henderson's lawyer said his legal team will consider an appeal against his conviction. Russia has sent paratroopers to Belarus in a show of support for its ally amid tensions over an influx of migrants at the border with Poland. The European Union says Belarus is encouraging thousands of migrants to cross its borders illegally. It warns it could impose more sanctions against Belarus and against airlines carrying migrants. Rail services through Salisbury are set to fully resume on Tuesday. That's after a crash involving 2 derailed trains. 5 carriages have been removed from the line between Salisbury and Andover. A South Western Railway train failed to stop despite braking, leaving the driver with life-changing injuries. More on all of the day's top stories at the top of the hour. See you then.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Lots of emails regarding our tax. Hugely. Alex says, consumers will only win if they appreciate proper regulation versus the cheapest price. Regulation keeps everyone safe. The race to the bottom is never a real win for the consumer. Good point. John says, I used to drive private hire, and despite working long hours some weeks, I struggled to make decent money. I was often forced to work 6 to 7 days to make a decent wage. And Stuart says, another factor coming down the line is like next year's HMRC compliance checks on drivers applying for licence renewals. All good points and a fabulous discussion. Keep your emails coming in. Tell us what you want to be discussed. On the Money is your show too. And now it's time for my On the Money regular feature. It's Startup Britain. Now, last year, around 50,000 startup businesses were created in Britain every single month. That's a record. We're such an entrepreneurial people. And we have one of those startups with us today. Tom Harper's the co-founder of Little Imagineers, a family-run lockdown-born business making children's play equipment and furniture. After 15 years as a chartered accountant working at investment banks, Tom decided to pursue this business venture with his partner, Helen Harper, and Little Imagineers has just launched its first product, a children's play sofa, otherwise known as a Purdue. And here he is, Tom Harper. Tom, good to see you.
Hi, thank you.
What I always ask Startup Britain guests, what made you do it? What was it in your mind that made you decide, after years of being an employee, you didn't want to do that anymore?
I think I've had a hunger for, owning a business for a long time. Going into finance was actually about my own personal education. I wanted to learn about finance. I wanted to learn how businesses worked. And so actually I feel like, by hook or by crook, whatever route, it's actually got me to where I kind of always wanted to be.
When you were doing those long hours in the finance industry, it's a pretty cutthroat, hard-driving industry. Were you nurturing your little dream? You obviously launched this with your partner. Did you always have a clear vision of what you wanted to do?
No, not for that whole time. I mean, I think people with a bit of an entrepreneurial spark, they have hundreds of ideas. There's lots of things, right? There's lots of things that cross your mind, or you've got notes and you talk to with your friends. And I think the challenge is getting that idea into reality, because there's 100 throwaway ideas and you think about them and nothing comes. And actually it's that one that you think, do you know what, this is it, and I'm gonna have to jump in with both feet.
So for now, you've alighted on children's furniture with Helen. What was it about, before we get to your specific product, which you're going to demonstrate for us, what was it about that particular subsector that made you think there is a gap? It strikes me, I've got 3 kids, all right, it was a while ago when they were babies, but there's endless children's wear, endless stuff you can get online. What did you think you could add that would make it worthwhile for you to risk your money, your time, your reputation, your sanity, frankly, by launching a business?
Yeah, so our backgrounds are actually, I've got a degree in psychology, believe it or not, developmental psychology, and my wife's a physiotherapist. And so, with a 3.5-year-old Harry and Charlie.
See him up there on the screen.
Yeah,
very nice.
He's nearly 7.
Are they watching?
Hopefully. No, Charlie's at school. I guess that background, it's always been close to us. And watching our kids grow, I've always taken an interest, and I've read beyond, my degree, because it's just been something I've wanted. And actually, what I've come to discover is kids learn and sort of develop best through play. And when they're, play is a state of mind which kids get into very freely, and they can't stop learning when they're in that frame of mind. And so creating things which engage children and let them be creative and imaginative and let them learn and develop themselves was a really attractive field to get into. I think a lot of toys are very age-specific, toys for 3-year-olds, toys for 4-year-olds, and 3 months' time they've stopped being looked at because they do one thing. And they don't engage people across, or don't engage children across age groups, and they don't engage people beyond, once the habituation to that product has taken place.
Do you think, Tom, that we've kind of, I'm a bit further down the track than you, but if we're roughly the same generation, he says, flattering himself, it's true, isn't it, that we're much more hands-on parents than our parents were, maybe. I was just left to roam around in the summer holidays, it's not like my parents didn't care, it's just, we all just rampaged around and did our own thing, You leave the house at 8 o'clock in the morning, come back at 6, your parents didn't know where you were. Things have changed now, haven't they? Parents are much more attentive, even though they're often working a lot harder.
Yeah, I think, the phrase that I hear most at the moment is Daddy, can you make it silly?
Yeah.
They like play, I feel like I'm, and certainly the last 18 months or so being at home, working, whilst working, and also now obviously on our own here, you've spent a lot more time with the family, and I think that's been exaggerated, if anything, and I am part of that home life. I am an active part of playtime. I quite enjoy it. It suits me personally. I never minded that anyway. I'm swinging on the monkey bars down at the playground anyway.
Yeah.
And so, it's been something that I've, I guess, embraced. Maybe it doesn't suit everyone to be getting chased around the playground, but for me it was quite easy.
So why don't we make television history, Tom? A GB News first. Why don't you show us live demonstration of the Purdue? There it is. It's a very beautiful object.
This is the chair version. Yeah. It's a modular sofa, so you can take it all apart, which is kind of the point.
Wow.
So if you were moving it from the basic chair, which we just had it in, you can very quickly build yourself or build your kids, or they can do it themselves.
That's a castle.
There's a castle,
or a
it's
wigwam.
a spaceship, or it's a den, or it's a place where your new puppy goes and sits when they're not supposed to. And then, once kids discover that it can move and it can be taken apart, we put handles on so that little kids can use it quite easily.
Yeah.
You can actually then use it for other things, so you can make it into a sofa. And
Absolutely.
the bits we've focused on is actually making it of a quality that, we use mattress quality foam in there. It would be very easy to make something that was just a set of blocks, a bit of building blocks, but actually we wanted it to be more than that. We wanted it to be really high quality, to be child-proof. So the springiness of the foam, actually, adults can sleep on this.
Yeah.
And, it's really comfortable. So, we're sending one to my parents for Christmas so that we've got space to fit everyone in this year.
But its default position is as a chair,
yeah,
right?
So once the kids have finished playing with it, you pick it back up again, and you're very quickly back into tucked away in the corner of your room, ready for bedtime, and you can, sit on and have your kids on there for a bedtime story.
That looks good. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that I think lots of parents will be thinking, even if they're not screaming this question at the television. What's it like when you spill orange juice on it? It looks quite luxurious. It's obviously very high quality, very very beautifully made, and very quite advanced materials. But what happens when inevitably the lunch goes off the plate and it's all over
it had to be
the sofa?
It had to be childproof. So it's actually got a Teflon-based high-tech coating. So two things were important for us. It had to be childproof, which means it has to be safe, first and foremost, has to be non-toxic. All of our covers, everything is REACH compliant, and we've got Ecotech covers so they don't do that. But we also needed it to have good qualities. There's a demo I did on International Coffee Day, actually, where I poured a cup of coffee over one of our grey versions.
Right.
And with a damp cloth, you can clean it off. So
very interesting.
They're designed to do that.
So how did you go from idea? Just take us through the journey. Idea, you're sitting in the kitchen, presumably, with Helen, with other friends, you're brainstorming. What was it that flicked the switch in your mind and made you and her think this is it, rather than the other ideas that you had?
Yeah, so first day of lockdown, I think I sent a picture to my team at work, because by 7:30 in the morning, I dragged the kids' mattresses down into the living room.
Because you still had a full-time job then,
Because I still had a full-time job.
Yeah.
And that first day, we got both the kids in the house, and I was like, well, you got to kind of embrace it. And so I had the mattresses down, and we were making a pirate den in the living room. And it just sort of dawned, that's hard work. It's going to take a lot of tidying up again.
Yeah.
What could we do? We've had inspiration from things we've seen. Sort of Swedish, sort of minimalist sofa styles and this kind of thing. And there's inspiration from elsewhere you can pick up. But we just started, and so I think that first day, the flick switch, the switch flicks, and we started buying some foam and see what the kids did with it, because I think the proof of concept was almost in what do kids do, because ultimately it can look, I can tell you what it does, but when you put kids in a room with it, what actually happens, and that's kind of the proof of the pudding, really, because it brings them to life. And I think once we got our kids engaged, and they were like, we had some quite jealous friends of Charlie's peering through the living room window, through the rainbow pictures on the windows, looking inside. And
that's what you want, pester power. That's the best kind of word of mouth marketing. So you had your idea, you drew up a simple design. It is, with all respect, clearly lots of thoughts gone into it, but it's a relatively simple design. How did you then go about setting up the business? You'd obviously worked in finance before.
Yeah.
How did you find out the nitty-gritty of, from the ground up, setting up a small business in this country?
Yeah,
Was it easier or harder than you thought it would be?
So I think some bits, I would say overall easier, but I couldn't have imagined the number of problems that we would have encountered along the way.
Yeah.
I've been in finance, so doing admin, setting up stuff on company's house, VAT registration, that kind of thing.
That's your bread and butter.
I can take that in my stride. That's fine. I didn't. That wasn't too much concern. Digital marketing,
right?
Figuring out how people react, on Facebook groups when they're presented with a product. That stuff was not blindsided, but very ill prepared for.
Yeah.
And I think creating a business, not too hard. making something work, making something that actually engages people and makes them interested is challenging.
You had the idea, you tested the product, your kids' mates are jealous, which is a good sign. You've done the admin. How did you get the thing manufactured, and where is it manufactured?
Yeah, so there's a Portuguese company that makes fabric. Foam's created and made in the UK, and we assemble them ourselves. And so it's, cobbled together in some respects, because you've got to take lots of different pieces, but we don't have sophisticated facilities.
And does this come in lots of colours? And where can people buy it?
Yeah, so our website is littleimagineers.com.
Is that a sort of riff on engineers? They're imagining
a little bit,
engineering.
yeah. I mean, sort of imagining you're an engineer, using engineering skills to build things. Littleimagineers.com. You can buy them. We've got 6 colours out now, all quite vibrant, bring a bit of energy, nice style to your living room, depending on kids' bedroom or playroom, wherever you fancy putting them.
And how's demand been so far? When did you start? When did you start marketing these, Tom?
We sort of started with a promotion over the summer because we wanted to get engaged with the community at large, and we ran a survey about how kids were affected in lockdown, and we offered one as a prize to get kids to draw pictures through going outside and discovering nature and building dens in the woods and that sort of thing. We launched at the end of August. We had some good interest to begin with. I think there was a lot of people who were sort of waiting for it to come out, and then, as ever, we'd love more sales than we've had. You can never have too much cash coming in, but it's good. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of people in. I've had people in Saudi Arabia contact us. I've had people in America. I've had Cyprus was, I think, my most recent one, where I've sent some fabric swatches out there. It's engaged.
And if some people have been asking at their televisions, willing me to ask, what's it like when you spill orange juice on it? Other people will be asking me, Tom, what's it like working with your wife?
We've got quite different personalities.
That's good.
Which is great, because we think about things in a very different way, and we come across problems and we approach them in a different way. So shall I leave it like that?
It's all going well in that photo anyway.
No, it's been great, and actually, it's lovely working with Helen. It's lovely talking to her with these things. But actually, the boys are really engaged, and I think
it will often be mums buying this. I mean, just inevitably, won't it, or not?
Not that we've seen, actually. A reasonable mix. I mean, we're quite, dads are just as engaged, like you said earlier on. We're engaged in play. We're engaged with what goes on in the house these days. I'm sure lots of mums.
And here's another on the money regular question for Startup Britain guests. What's the one piece of advice? Everything you've learned, you obviously learned a huge amount. You, your wife, many of your friends, I'm sure, to creating that object there and the business that it represents. What's the one piece of advice you'd pass on for people thinking, could I do that?
So one thing which is really obvious from transitioning from my old work to the new is the one piece of resource that you lack is actually experience, right? And so you need to tap into as many different sources of that experience as you can.
Yeah.
And ask people.
Don't be scared to ask questions.
Don't be scared to ask people help. You will know someone who started a business 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Some of the best advice was some of the simplest. Is like, make sure you know your regulations. And I was like,
fire regulations, foam regulations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, you know that day one, know that, and make sure you know your market. That was good advice, but that came from somebody who had been through it and had started their own businesses. And I think using that network, which you will have if you think about it, how do I set up a website? Ask around, and people have. I promise you, because I'm helping someone next week with their own startup. People love helping other people.
Pass it on. Tom Harper, best of luck with your business.
Thank
and that's
you very
all
much, Liam.
From us. I'm Liam Halligan. This is GB News, and that was On the Money.
Hello. A lot of cloud out there through the day today, and we've got some spells of rain through the rest of Friday. Pretty windy for many of us as well, and that's all down to a deep area of low pressure that we've got across the UK. You can see that anchored up towards the northwest of Scotland. Tightly packed isobars mean some pretty strong winds and a few weather fronts out there, which will bring us the rain as we go through the rest of the day today. Let's take a look at the picture then through this afternoon. You can see a spell of rain across many northern and western areas. This will be heavy at times, accompanied with those strong winds. Not as much rain further south, but a lot of cloud in the sky. Bits and pieces of rain coming and going. One or two brighter breaks at times, but pretty gusty. Those winds will be quite breezy across many areas, particularly around some of our western coasts, but mild, highs of 15 degrees. Through this evening and overnight, that rain continues to journey its way eastwards. Heavy for a time across parts of Cumbria and Yorkshire, but it will ease as we go through the evening and overnight. So for many, it's becoming much drier, and there'll be some clear skies across Scotland and Northern Ireland. So temperatures starting to take a tumble here as those winds ease, 5 or 6 degrees in rural spots, but staying mild across the south in double figures. So as we start Saturday then, plenty of sunshine across a large swathe of Scotland, northwest England and Northern Ireland, but a lot of cloud elsewhere. Through the day though, I am hopeful that we will see some breaks developing in that cloud, but it will stay quite grey down those eastern coasts with some patchy drizzle, and later rain arrives into the west of Northern Ireland, but for eastern parts of Northern Ireland it stays largely fine. Best of the sunshine across Scotland through Saturday, temperatures just a shade down on what they were during Friday. Through Saturday evening then, we continue to see this weak weather front pushing across Northern Ireland, bringing some thicker cloud and outbreaks of rain. Elsewhere, some patchy cloud, but under clearing skies, we will see some fog forming. So by the time we start Remembrance Sunday, a bit of a grey picture for many, brightening up for some through the day, and it stays on the rather mild side. Bye-bye.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very good afternoon. Welcome live to Glasgow and COP26. We're broadcasting here for the next hour on GB News as things go down to the wire. Can a deal be done on climate change? Will Glasgow be viewed as a success? We'll have full coverage with me and my colleague Tom Harwood across this conference, both inside and out. And we'll be looking back at what precisely has been achieved over the past 2 weeks. But fundamentally, can a deal be done today? That and much more after we get the news at the top of the hour.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 2 o'clock. David Henderson, the businessman convicted over organising the flight that crashed and killed footballer Emiliano Sala, has been sentenced to 18 months in prison. The plane crashed into the English Channel in 2019, killing the striker and pilot David Ibbotson. David Henderson's lawyer says his legal team will consider an appeal against his conviction. 1,185 people reached the UK in a single day yesterday, in a new record for the current migrant crisis. Rescue operations worked well into the night, with some of the 33 boats carrying up to 50 people. Yesterday's total surpassed the previous single-day record set earlier this month. Alex Sharma says it's his sincere intention to end COP26 today. The Climate Summit's president added that the draft of the COP26 agreement is not yet totally clean as negotiations continue. The latest draft agreement appears to back away from a call to phase out coal and fossil fuel subsidies completely. Russia has sent paratroopers to Belarus in a show of support for its ally amid tensions over an influx of migrants at the border with Poland. The European Union says Belarus is encouraging thousands of migrants to cross its borders illegally. It warns it could impose more sanctions against Belarus and against airlines carrying migrants. Turkish Airlines has agreed to suspend one-way ticket sales for Middle Eastern migrants looking to reach Europe via Belarus. Rail services through Salisbury are set to fully resume on Tuesday after a crash involving 2 derailed trains. 5 carriages have been removed from the line between Salisbury and Andover. 2 weeks ago, a South Western Railway train failed to stop despite braking, leaving the driver with life-changing injuries. Tory MP Sir Roger Gale says it's plain wrong for MPs to claim expenses on their rent while owning homes in London. 14 MPs, including former Attorney General Sir Geoffrey Cox, are reportedly earning money as landlords in London while also renting homes with taxpayers' cash. A loophole in the parliamentary expenses scheme allows them to do this. Paul Goodman, former MP and editor of the Conservative Home, told GB News the practice is murky.
If you're living in one place and working in another, can you claim? It seems to me reasonable that you can. Can you rent out somewhere and claim for somewhere else? That seems to me to be much murkier.
A student who admitted a game of truth or dare to murdering his step-grandmother has been sentenced to life and will serve a minimum of 15 years. 21-year-old Tiernan Darnton told 2 friends that he'd set a curtain on fire at 94-year-old Mary Gregory's bungalow in Lancashire. An inquest had ruled it was an accident caused by a discarded cigarette. Police reopened the case when Darnton also confessed during a counselling session. Johnson & Johnson is to split into 2 companies, separating baby powder from medicine in its biggest ever shake-up. The healthcare giant selling the medical and prescription drug business will keep Johnson & Johnson as its name. The name of the new company has not yet been disclosed. England's Ellis Genge has become the latest player to test positive for COVID-19. A Rugby Football Union statement said he received the results